Welcome to the deepest abyss on Earth, where pressure crushes metal and darkness is eternal. A silent biological war for the last drop of energy is about to begin. Let's dive. At a depth of 11,000 meters, the pressure is a silent executioner. It exerts over 8 tons per square inch force, enough to crush a heavy-duty steel tank into a twisted knot of scrap metal. Most of the Earth's surface life would be vaporized instantly by the sheer weight of the water column. Yet in this graveyard of light, a biological invasion is unfolding. This is not a war fought with steel or titanium, but with flesh chemistry and sheer numbers. We are at the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the most hostile frontier on the planet. The seafloor here appears dead, a vast silent desert of fine silt stretching into the eternal void. But beneath this mud, the Earth is bleeding. A massive tectonic shift has cracked the crust, releasing a toxic high-pressure flow of methane and hydrogen sulfide. To us, this is lethal poison. To the dwellers of the deep, this is the final gold mine of energy in a world of starvation. From the darkness above, a biological rain begins. Thousands of microscopic larvae carried by freezing currents descend toward the leak. These are the Hadal threadworms. They are the ultimate colonizers of the abyss. Unlike the giants of the shallow reefs, these creatures are thin, translucent, and incredibly resilient. They lack eyes or mouths. Instead, they are built as complex biological factories hosting billions of specialized bacteria that turn lethal chemicals into the fuel of life. As they touch down, they don't just survive, they claim. Within hours, they anchor themselves into the sediment, their bodies extending like pale vibrating needles. They are weaving a living carpet over the methane source, sealing the area from any other competitors. This is the birth of a new chemical empire. But in the Mariana Trench, no treasure goes unnoticed. Something is watching from the shadows. The invasion has just begun, but the original masters of this trench are not ready to give up their territory. What kind of predator could thrive in this toxic fortress? Drop a comment below. If you were trapped at 11,000 meters, would you trust your armor or your ability to adapt? Subscribe and hit the bell to see the first clash in the next part of the Kingdom of No Light. Beyond the initial arrival, the landscape of the Challenger Deep undergoes a radical, visceral transformation. The biological invasion of the Hadal threadworms has moved past the stage of simple settlement. It has now entered the phase of total industrialization. These creatures do not just inhabit the trench. They transform it into a massive living chemical refinery. While the rest of the ocean world sleeps under the crushing weight of the water column, this colony is wide awake, burning with a cold fire fueled by the planet's internal toxic blood. Inside each slender, translucent body lies a specialized organ known as the trophosome. This is the heart of the operation, a dense tissue packed with billions of sulfur-oxidizing bacteria. This isn't just biology, it's a high-stakes partnership of absolute survival. The worms have abandoned traditional stomachs and mouths for this radical internal engine. They act as the transport and the filter, absorbing lethal hydrogen sulfide and methane directly through their skin and pumping it into their own bloodstream. To prevent these toxins from killing the worm itself, their blood has evolved a unique, oversized hemoglobin. This molecule acts like a secure transport vehicle, binding the poison so tightly that it cannot damage the worm's cells, yet delivering it perfectly to the waiting bacteria inside. Within the dark chambers of the trophosome, the bacteria perform a feat that defies the laws of the sunlit world. They strip the electrons from the sulfur, using that raw energy to stitch together carbon molecules into sugars and fats. This is the ultimate fuel of the abyss, generated without a single photon of light. This process is so efficient that it allows the colony to grow at a pace that seems almost mechanical, expanding across the rocky fissure like a slow-motion explosion of white silk. However, this biological success creates a byproduct that serves a darker purpose. As the colony processes thousands of liters of seawater, it exhales a thick, milky plume of concentrated sulfur and acidic waste. This isn't just trash, it is a defensive wall. The water surrounding the white oasis becomes a corrosive chemical fog, a lethal perimeter that burns the sensitive sensors of any uninvited guest. The native amphipods who have survived on the meager scraps of marine snow for eons find themselves at a crossroads. They can sense the massive accumulation of protein within the colony, a feast that could sustain their population for generations. But the toxic shield keeps them at bay. They circle the outskirts like starving wolves at the edge of a campfire, waiting for a single gap in the chemical defense. Beneath the mud, the Earth's crust continues to groan and flex a low-frequency vibration that resonates through the colony. Every seismic shift pushes more gas through the fissure, feeding the worm's growth. They respond by secreting hardened tubes made of chitin and protein, cementing themselves into a permanent skeletal infrastructure that anchors the entire reef against the shifting currents. This is no longer a collection of individuals. It is an integrated biological machine, a pulsing grid of energy that is slowly rewriting the rules of the trench. But in a world of such extreme scarcity, an oasis of this size cannot remain a secret for long. The chemical scent of the colony, a drifting trail of organic molecules, is already traveling miles across the barren seafloor. It is a siren song for the desperate. From the darkest cracks of the surrounding canyons, new shadows are emerging. Blind armored crabs with pincers capable of cracking stone are closing in. Even the Mariana Snailfish, the apex ghost of the depths, has ceased its aimless patrolling and is now circling with cold, calculated intent. The lockdown is complete, but the siege is just beginning. The pressure is rising, and soon the chemical barrier will be tested by the hungry reality of the Hadal food chain. While the internal engines of the Hadal threadworms hum with relentless efficiency, the surrounding silence of the trench is shattered by the desperate movements of the dispossessed. For eons, the gray silt-covered plains of the Challenger Deep belong to the scavengers. Creatures like the Hirondelia gigas, a specialized species of amphipod, have spent millions of years patrolling these barren wastes, waiting for the rare gift of marine snow or a fallen carcass. But the rules of this ancient kingdom are being rewritten in real time. The old money of the abyss. Those who survived on scraps and patience now find themselves facing a new money empire that doesn't just share the resources, it monopolizes them. The struggle at the edge of the colony is a masterclass in spatial warfare. Hundreds of pale multi-legged amphipods converge on the white oasis, their antennae twitching violently as they pick up the overwhelming scent of concentrated protein. They move like a disorganized infantry driven by a hunger that has no bottom. However, as they approach the perimeter, they hit a wall that isn't made of stone, but of chemistry. The threadworms have saturated the boundary layer with a concentrated plume of hydrogen sulfide and sulfuric acid. This bioshield is more than a fence. It is an active denial system. The amphipods, despite their hardened chitinous armor, find their sensory organs overwhelmed by the toxic fog. To step inside is to risk chemical suffocation as the acidic water burns through their delicate respiratory membranes. Strategic dominance in the deep isn't achieved through teeth and claws alone, it is won through infrastructure. Like a massive automated construction project, the threadworms are cementing their presence into the very bedrock of the Mariana Trench. They secrete hardened tubes made of a complex mix of calcium and chitin, creating a dense vertical forest that offers no purchase for outsiders. This living architecture does more than protect the worms, it alters the local environment. By interlocking their tubes, the colony creates a stagnant, low-oxygen microclimate within its core, a zone where only they and their symbiotic bacteria can breathe. Any small organism that manages to slip past the chemical shield soon finds itself trapped in a maze of suffocating silk, unable to navigate the oxygen-depleted corridors of the worm forest. This is the ultimate eviction notice. The threadworms are essentially locking down the methane seep, capping the Earth's energy leak with a living lid that ensures every single molecule of gas is processed by their internal factories. As the colony grows, it creates a feedback loop of dominance. The more methane they consume, the more they expand. The more they expand, the more territory they deny to the native scavengers. The amphipods are forced further into the surrounding desert, reduced to watching from the shadows as the wealth of the planet is hoarded by these translucent invaders. But as the colony matures, it begins to act as a beacon. The chemical signals, the industrial waste of this biological refinery, travel far beyond the impact zone, echoing through the lightless canyons. It attracts the interest of those who don't care for methane, but for the life that methane creates. High above the white carpet, a pale, ghostly shadow begins to circle the Mariana Snailfish. The undisputed apex predator of the Hadal zone has arrived. It doesn't look like a warrior. Its body is soft, its skin nearly transparent, and it moves with a slow, eerie grace. But its presence shifts the dynamic of the siege. It is not here to destroy the infrastructure, it is here to tax it. The snailfish waits at the edge of the chemical fog, a silent observer in a war of attrition, knowing that in the kingdom of no light, every empire eventually feeds its ghosts. The eerie calm of the White Fortress is short-lived, as the very foundation of the Challenger Deep begins to revolt against the empire built upon its back. While the Hadal threadworms have mastered the art of biological monopoly, they remain prisoners of the geology that sustains them. The Mariana Snailfish, once a distant ghost, has moved from silent observation to active taxation. It glides through the chemical fog with a terrifying immunity, its scaleless, gelatinous skin acting as a buffer against the acidic plumes. Every strike is a surgical removal of an opportunistic amphipod, but the snailfish's movements do more than just hunt. They create turbulence that stresses the delicate structural integrity of the worm forest. The tax collector of the abyss is no longer waiting for crumbs. It is disrupting the grid. Suddenly, the rhythmic pulse of the colony is interrupted by a low-frequency groan that resonates through the tectonic plates. Deep beneath the crust, the pressure valves of the Earth shift. The methane seep, the vital artery of the empire, begins to flicker. On the biological monitoring level, the impact is instantaneous. A massive gas pocket beneath the primary fissure ruptures, sending a shockwave of boiling sediment through the colony. One of the central structural pillars of the threadworm reef snaps, releasing a raw, unfiltered jet of gas that the worms can no longer process. The bioshield, once a seamless dome of toxic protection, begins to fray at the edges. The dispossessed scavengers sense the weakness immediately. The amphipods, driven by a collective hunger that has been suppressed for weeks, launch a desperate counter-assault. They target the breach, their jagged mandibles tearing at the exposed soft tissues of the worms that have been stripped of their protective tubes. This is the biological equivalent of a system failure. As the gas pressure drops, the symbiotic bacteria within the trophosomes begin to starve, causing the once vibrant white stalks to wither into a sickly gray. The empire is losing its power, and the native inhabitants of the trench are reclaiming the mud with a violent, frantic energy. Then, the true terror of the Hadal zone arrives: geological instability. A secondary fissure opens several meters away, acting like a vacuum that drains the lifeblood away from the primary colony. The energy that fueled the rise of the threadworms is now being redirected to a new, unclaimed patch of the seafloor. As the original seep dries up, the threadworms begin a slow, agonizing retreat, pulling their bodies deep into their chitinous pipes in a futile attempt to conserve moisture and energy. But the Earth isn't finished. A massive turbidity current, a landslide of fine silt triggered by the tectonic shift, roars down the slope of the trench. This wall of liquid mud swallows the white oasis in seconds. The living infrastructure, which took weeks of meticulous growth to establish, is buried under meters of suffocating sediment. The Mariana Snailfish, sensing the impending catastrophe through its lateral lines, beats its oversized fins to ascend, narrowly escaping the subsurface avalanche. In the aftermath, the bioluminescent glow that once defined this territory is extinguished. The chemical signals vanish. The kingdom of no light returns to its default state of absolute freezing void. The collapse is total, proving that in the deepest trench on Earth, dominance is a fleeting illusion. Every biological empire is merely a guest of the shifting crust, and when the Earth moves, the price of occupancy is paid in extinction. Yet deep within the fresh layer of silt, a single microscopic larva begins to stir, waiting for the next breath of the planet. As the heavy silt of the turbidity current begins to settle, a new and far more calculated threat emerges from the jagged shadows of the trench floor. The geological disaster that buried the empire was a massive hammer blow, but what follows is a surgical strike, a biological dismantling that mirrors the most sophisticated forms of human sabotage. In the freezing void of the Challenger Deep, where the surviving threadworms struggle to poke their fractured tubes through the fresh layer of mud, a group of specialists has arrived to finish what the Earth started. These are the serrated Hadal scavengers, worm-like predators whose entire existence is dedicated to one thing: severing the lines of life. In the absolute darkness, the interlocked tubes of the threadworm colony act as far more than just a home. They function as the colony's primary sensory network. Vibrations travel through the chitinous forest with incredible speed, allowing thousands of individuals to coordinate their defense or sense a shift in the vital methane flow miles away. It is a biological internet, a high-speed data network of the deep that ensures the survival of the collective. But the newcomers have evolved specifically to exploit this structural connection. With jaws lined with microscopic diamond-hard serrations capable of slicing through bone-hard chitin, the scavengers do not simply hunt, they dismantle. They target the junctions of the colony, the primary trunks where the sensory vibrations are most concentrated. With a single clean cut, a scavenger severs a massive section of the living reef from its roots. The effect is a total communications blackout. As the top half of the threadworm drifts away into the dark current, its internal bacterial trophosomes spill out, creating a chaotic cloud of organic fluid and methane. The severed root, still anchored to the methane fissure, retracts in a blind instinctive panic. Because the vibratory link has been physically cut, the surrounding worms have no idea that a predator is working in their midst. They continue to pump energy into empty space, wasting the precious chemical resources they fought so hard to monopolize. It is a systematic disabling of the biological infrastructure, turning a coordinated empire into a collection of confused, isolated survivors. These cable cutters of the abyss are not here for a quick snack. They are here to break the system, ensuring the colony can no longer mount a collective defense. This tactical disruption acts like a siren for every opportunistic parasite in the trench. Without the sensory network to warn them, the threadworms are helpless as swarms of tiny crustaceans and parasitic worms enter the open severed tubes. They begin to hollow out the empire from the inside, consuming the rich bacterial cultures that once fueled the colony's rise. The white oasis, which once glowed with the cold fire of industrial-scale chemosynthesis, is now a ghost town of broken pipes and leaking gas. The chemical shield has flickered out the defensive sulfur fog, dissipating into the freezing currents, leaving the heart of the colony exposed to the merciless hunger of the Hadal zone. However, the collapse of the network brings forth the final auditor of the deep. The Mariana Snailfish hovering in the gloom above senses the sudden shift in the water's frequency. It doesn't hunt the broken worms, it hunts the saboteurs. With a powerful flick of its tail, the snailfish dives into the wreckage, its soft skin squeezing through the jagged gaps of the ruined reef. It strikes the scavenger worms with surgical precision, gulping down the cutters before they can sever the remaining lifelines. It is a grim three-way war of attrition, the scavengers dismantling the colony, the parasites hollowing it out, and the snailfish policing the ruins for the biggest prize. In the deepest trench on Earth, every connection is a vulnerability, and as the last sensory cables are severed, the abyss returns to its original state, a place where information is as rare as light, and silence is the only true protection. In the end, the Mariana Trench does not care for empires. The wreckage of the White Colony, once a bustling refinery of biological innovation, is now nothing more than a thin layer of organic debris, quickly being reclaimed by the ancient silt of the Challenger Deep. The threadworms, the scavengers, and the saboteurs have all played their parts in a play that has no audience. Here, at 11,000 meters, the only true victor is the pressure itself. It is a world where dominance is measured not in centuries, but in the fleeting moments between tectonic shifts. Nature in the Hadal zone follows a brutal circular logic. An energy source appears, an empire rises to monopolize it, and eventually the Earth moves to reset the board. It is a reminder that in the deep sea as on the surface, no resource remains a secret for long. The success of the threadworms wasn't their ability to conquer, but their readiness to be reborn. Even now beneath the fresh mud, millions of dormant larvae are waiting, sensing the next breath of methane. They are the ultimate long-term investors, patient enough to wait for 1,000 years for a single minute of opportunity. As the Mariana Snailfish glides back into the void, it leaves behind a graveyard that is already preparing for its next resurrection. The kingdom of no light remains a frontier of extreme adaptation where the price of life is absolute efficiency. We have witnessed a war for the last drop of energy on Earth, a struggle that proves that even in the most desolate corners of our planet, the drive to exist is unbreakable. The abyss is silent once more, but it is not empty. It is merely waiting. Next episode teaser. But as the chemical fires of the Challenger Deep flicker out, a new massive vibration is echoing from the sub-trenches, places so deep and dark that even the snailfish fear to tread. What kind of leviathan could be hiding in the cracks of the Earth's crust? Join us in the next episode as we explore the unknown giants of the Ultra Hadal Zone.